Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, I say musicians, artists. I was about to say magicians, but no, but amazing people all around the world of crypto and blockchain. And today I have another amazing guest. He's coming to us from Hong Kong. His name is Terence Kwok. He is the founder and CEO of Humanity Protocol. Terence, welcome.
Thank you, Jamil. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining me. And first question I have for you to kick things off is, what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
I think, in terms of backgrounds in the Web3 and crypto space, you can say everybody sort of has a logical background and everybody sort of has a illogical background, right? So, I was actually always a tech entrepreneur. I started off my first company in the travel and hospitality space back in 2012. Grew it to become one of the first billion-dollar tech companies out of Hong Kong. And then COVID just completely made things really made things really challenging because we were operating in the travel and hospitality industry, right? And so, sort of started dabbling into crypto. Knew that, hey, you know what, whether it's on the technology side of things or whether it's product, whether it's scaling a business, that is something that I know how to do. And so decided to start working on Humanity Protocol last year.
And what is Humanity Protocol all about, including you recently had a seed round? How did that go as well?
Yeah, I mean, Humanity Protocol for us, I think we're drawing a lot of comparisons to WorldCoin for what we're trying to do. I think, for us, what we're also launching with soon is some sort of biometrics technology product for, proving that you're a human being. But ultimately, for us, it's really about building an open identity graph on the blockchain. And what I mean by that is if you think about data and identity historically, as the internet evolved over the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's always owned by somebody other than you, right? You're browsing stuff on Facebook, you're browsing, stuff on Twitter, you're creating content on Twitter, on YouTube, all that stuff, all that content, all your personal information is being controlled and owned by somebody else, right? And so what we're doing is essentially say, okay, you know what? How do we actually create a blockchain, leverage the technology that's out there right now, and then also proprietary technology that we're developing, essentially create a blockchain where different pieces of information about a human being, about you, for example, Jamil, can be stored, encrypted on chain, and you have full control and access to it. And you can also potentially delegate access to different sort of applications, developers, people, et cetera, right? And so when we think about sort of the proof of humanity piece and we look at biometrics proving that you're a human being, that's largely the first step. And what I mean by that is we actually think there's tremendous utility for that, because if we think about airdrops, we think about games, we think about in the current age of artificial intelligence, it's really difficult to figure out whether a person is really a person unless you meet them in person, right? You look at all the deepfake videos, you look at content, you look at tweets, a lot of these are bots. We look at all the airdrops, all the games that are coming up with millions, hundreds of millions of users. How do you know they're not really just, people creating a lot of accounts and trying to earn sort of rewards and benefits, right? So for us, it's really how do we actually start by checking whether you're a human being or not and providing that as a service to different sort of developers and applications. And then beyond that, think about different sort of pieces of data about you that makes you human, right? Maybe it's your work, maybe it's your educational credentials. It's different sort of things that we want to encrypt, have you essentially own it, control it, And then whenever there is somebody, an application, another blockchain protocol, a company that wants to request for this information, then they're able to do that, and with your permission.
That's the first step. Or what are the other steps you see along the line?
The other steps, as I said, right? The first step is like proving that you're a human being. The second step is actually piecing other things about you into the blockchain, right? So imagine the first step is, you actually want to claim some tokens or rewards for an airdrop, but you're an honest person. So you have one address where you interact with the blockchain or the protocol, and you want to claim your airdrops. But there are other people that are controlling 100,000 different accounts doing that, right? And so, proving that you're a human being creates tremendous value for real human beings. The next step is different sort of pieces of data, right? If we look at something even as simple as KYC, you look at regulation, you look at enterprise DeFi, different sort of platforms are now saying, hey, you know what, we need actually to do a full KYC on you to ensure that you're not a money launderer, right? And what we are saying is, imagine being able to do that once, have that information encrypted, controlled by you, and then, imagine a DeFi platform wants to check whether you're an accredited investor or not, or a DeFi platform wants to check to make sure that you're not a sanctioned individual, right? Before using their services and applications, then they can also do so, right? And if we go beyond that, it's even potentially your medical records, your educational records. Imagine you apply for a new job. How do we know that all the stuff that you write in your resume is actually factually correct? Right. I could say, hey, you know what? I actually work for Google. I work for Microsoft. I went to, Cambridge University. I went to Harvard University. Who knows? Right. So imagine there are actually these sort of snippets of information that are verified by in our terms, what we call an identity validator. Okay. Where it might be a university issuing a verifiable credential saying that you actually did go to that university, right? Or your previous employer issuing a verifiable credential saying that you actually worked there, right? And then different sort of parties could then make use of this information with your permission.
I like it. I like the promises of blockchain. There's three, right? There's banking for the unbanked. There's a voice for the voiceless, and there's identity for the unidentified. So
Absolutely.
I love to see that your proof of humanity is fulfilling among that identity for the unidentified. So you offer the human layer of the internet. A lot of people don't know what the human layer of the internet is, or that it's either even should be a human layer. What are the benefits for them to getting in touch with the
I
internet?
think, like historically, the internet is filled with human beings. You know what I'm saying? Historically, if you think about it, there is very little incentive for you for the internet to not be made up of human beings, right? Most content is created by human beings. You think about your first sort of generation, 25 years ago, when people started creating their first email addresses, right? You had a bunch of them. You created a bunch of them. Over time, you probably use one, maybe two, maybe three. One for your professional, one for your personal, and one just for shits, maybe. Right. So the whole idea is that historically, the internet is made up of human beings. But in recent times, because of the advancement of AI and various technologies, it's no longer filled with human beings. If we think about, looking at something like as simple as Twitter, one of the biggest problems when Elon was trying to buy it was saying, I didn't realize there are so many bot accounts. These are not human beings, right? Because now it's really easy to create bots and AI agents. and potentially garner some sort of economic benefit, right? Like it might not even be monetary, right? It might be, you know what? I have 10 followers on Twitter, but you might have 1 million followers on Twitter. I have 10 real human beings. You might have 1 million bots. Do you know what I'm saying? But from a social proof perspective, from from other people's perspective, they were like, oh, you know what? This guy's followed by 1 million people. But that's not really true nowadays, right? So so I think it's important to be able to differentiate why somebody's a human being. And I think the most concrete example also, drawing from sort of the traditional Web2 tech internet world, is as simple as that the entire industry has historically been driven by advertising. If you think about advertising, what advertising is, somebody, some business paying a platform to reach a human being who was previously unaware of that business, right? The problem with this business model, when you can't really be sure whether there is a human being on or not, is that suddenly you might be advertising to a bunch of bots. And when you're advertising to bots, you're essentially wasting money because human beings are able to spend money and go buy soft drinks, buy a car, or buy whatever it is, buy clothing from the brand that it's trying to advertising, right? Bots are not. So all of that money is going to waste. And this is also sort of a phenomenon that we sort of call click fraud, right? In the advertising space, digital advertising space, right? So from my perspective, it's only getting more and more important.
Yeah, I got a lot of people who say, hey, what? Give me your numbers. I'm like, my numbers aren't your business, but my numbers, if you look at my LinkedIn and my Twitter, they're all real people. I don't have bot accounts, that I follow or that follow me. But the one people with the million followers, maybe they know 5 people. So how do we eliminate that fraud? I call it fraud. You know, and how do you really easily identify that? How, if you're a common layperson, how can you say, hey, these bots have eyes and ears when they don't? How do how can you circumvent that fraud?
With the way we look at it, and a little bit similar to what WorldCoin is doing, right? Like it's really ultimately down to biometrics. Right now, if you look at KYC, which is historically, snapping a photo of your passport, that stuff can easily be faked. Super easy, right? If we look at sort of a video of your face, that stuff is really easy to fake at this point. Like I still remember a couple years back, like all the KYC for platforms was, hey, you know what? Snap your passport and then please make sure you take a photo or video of you holding onto that passport and a piece of paper with the date, today's date. I mean, a couple years ago, it was not easy to fake. Now, today, it's trivial. A bunch of online tools, like a 12-year-old could do it without any sort of coding skill, right? So I think the way we're thinking about this is really about biometrics. And one thing that we realize is that your palm, so your prints, so a lot of parts about a human being are actually unique. If we look at facial features, everybody's facial features are unique. Obviously, everybody has sort of a doppelganger lying out there. But even so, everybody's unique, right? You look at your fingerprint, it's unique. You look at your iris, it's unique. And one thing that we are leveraging to start for Humanity Protocol is your palm, right? Because your palm print and your veins underneath your palm are completely unique to every single person. And so what we're doing is we're leveraging that to say, okay, you know what? If you scan your print and your veins, we know that you're a unique human being. And if you've already scanned before and you try to do it again, we'll be like, no can do because you're an existing human being in the network. Right. So then we're able to say, okay, you know what, this blockchain address or this email address, or whatever it is, form of identity, or a DID issued on Humanity Protocol, this is a real, unique, individual human being.
I like what you're doing so far. I want to get to you. You compare yourself to WorldCoin or in the same boat, right? Your buy.
We think we're not just really about the humanity piece, right? Like because we also want to get into different sort of information, data, um, beyond that. So we actually think what we're trying to do is sort of a wider idea than WorldCoin. But because of sort of the biometrics component, which a little, seems a little bit let's say advanced and novel for a lot of people. That's why I mentioned WorldCoin because we sort of get compared to them from various media outlets and people.
Well, let's do a comparison. You know, um, WorldCoin has been under fire by governments who don't want the people them to capture people's eyeballs. Yet there seems to be not a reluctance to capture palms. Like why? It's the same thing as biometrics, as individual information capture. Why is the palms such a lesser what's the word, feared way to do it?
I think it's just a social stigma. That's one thing, right? Like when you look at your eyeballs, it's like a very personal thing. If you look at sort of palm prints as a form of biometrics and identification, that's been used by governments a lot. That's been used by, even companies like Amazon for payments in the US. It's been used by, Tencent in China as part of WeChat Pay. Um, it's just not, it doesn't seem as personal. That's one thing. And then the other thing is also very much to do with how data is being handled, right? So it's the fact that, the way we've designed Humanity Protocol, even with the Palm registration, we're not taking any videos, not taking any images. We're essentially converting sort of your patterns because biometrics is really just about pattern recognition, right? Considering we're converting the patterns into a long string of unrecognizable hashes and making comparisons against them. So versus, when we look at something like WorldCoin, where in the past, what they were actually doing is storing essentially raw files, raw images, raw photos, raw videos of the scan, and then using it for training their machine learning models for pattern recognition. I think that is sort of where the biggest challenge lies.
Okay, so it's in the usage of the information that's captured.
It's
Then
a usage of the information and sort of call it the social stigma also.
got it. So the future, I want to find out the future of unaudited biometrics, absent blockchain. I guess then you have AI running wild, right? What's the future of that? Or are we going to circumvent or control? I use this as a checks and balance.
Sorry, Jamil, do you mind repeating the question? I didn't quite get that.
Yeah. What is the what? So with that said, what is the future of unaudited biometrics absent the use of blockchain?
Unaudited biometrics. What do you mean by that?
I guess if it's not controlled by government, if they're not controlled by government or not, there's not some regulatory,
Well, I think it's as simple as identification. I think that's one thing. But beyond identification, it's what we call proof of humanity, right? There is value in being able to know that you're a human being, without necessarily even knowing who you are, right? Frankly, if a big company that's, and there are other pieces of data, right? Like if you think about internet platforms, they don't really even care who you are. They don't care about your name and different sort of things. They kind of know they care about your income level. They care about your different sort of interests. They care about different sort of things, your browsing history, all that sort of stuff, right? But right now, all of that stuff can sort of be faked. You can sort of create many different bots that are faking all of these sort of things. And when an advertiser wants to reach 100 people, if they're really just reaching 99 fake people, that are generated by AI and reaching one person, technically they really shouldn't be paying 100x the advertising spend that they are, right? So that I think is sort of one of the key things when it comes to sort of the biometrics piece in terms of proving that you're a human being. Um, and from our perspective, because we're building an open blockchain for this, we absolutely even think this could be something that we would make sense to work with governments for, right? Where, if they do actually want to have different sorts of PII, personally identifiable information about people, whether it's biometrics, whether it's their nationalities, their passport, all that sort of stuff. The whole idea is we're building a suite of technologies so that this information can be encrypted and it could be self-sovereign to the person who provide that data, and they can control access to it.
Sounds good to me. I went down the government role because really of one thing. You're in Hong Kong. You got a very progressive and supportive government there. You have a wonderful ecosystem in Hong Kong that other people are aware of. You know how advanced Hong Kong is as far as blockchain and crypto. It's been a couple of years, a couple of 24 since I found out the state of crypto in Hong Kong. Could you tell me, the state of everything there and how you are supporting the ecosystem and how the system's supporting you?
So I think for us, Humanity Protocol is a very in terms of a team, it's super decentralized, right? I don't I'm from Hong Kong. My family's based here. I grew up here, but my I was born in the U.S. I was actually born in the U.S. and much of my team the team for Humanity Protocol is very decentralized. We have people everywhere from the US to Europe to Africa to Southeast Asia, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So we definitely don't consider this to be sort of a Humanity Protocol to be sort of a Hong Kong thing, right? Even though I obviously, it's I'm very proud to be from here and have deep roots here. Um, but if I do have to comment on the Hong Kong piece a little bit, I think what the government is doing makes a lot of sense, right? It's very progressive. They're attracting a lot of talent from all over the world to be here. The government's issuing, sort of regular licenses for crypto exchanges, all the way to creating different sort of schemes to incentivize companies to set up their headquarters here. For hiring, et cetera, et cetera. So we're definitely seeing a very vibrant ecosystem that's being built up in the city.
Great. Now you're fully decentralized, so this means that, and I'm certain that there's use cases other than just, advertising, especially when you're in, Africa and different areas of the world that are less, that have less opportunities than others. So what are the key areas that you foresee adoption of your protocol, and why do you see it being effective in all these areas?
I think if we look at different sort of markets, right? Like if we just even look at the Web3 one, I mentioned advertising because that's the closest in terms of the Web2 world. If we think about Web3 world, it's on-chain games, it's deep in. How do you ensure that people who are operating these networks, you don't have one person running a very disproportionate percentage of the infrastructure, right? If you look at airdrops, every single project's coming out with airdrops to incentivize your early users. How do we ensure that, you don't have industrial farmers creating hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of accounts to sort of milk these rewards in a way that is not beneficial to anybody? We look at and then we ultimately also look at, developing countries. How do we, there's obviously the whole concept of universal basic income, right? Where, how do we actually distribute more to people on sort of a one person, one share sort of way, right? And that's also something that we were actively sort of working on. But ultimately, we don't even think it should be sort of universal basic income. It's, universal basic equity, right? How do we look at, different sort of projects, different sort of companies that actually want to distribute, whether it's equity, whether it's tokens, whether it's value, right, to many people. And we see ourselves as sort of being the portal to do that. So we anticipate a lot of different use cases, and it's really not just this one thing, because we do believe that the problem we're trying to solve is a pretty big problem down the road.
I don't think I've heard it put that way. Universal basic equity. It's an interesting concept. What would the world look like if we had that?
The world would look like where, we would, the whole idea is like universal basic income is some sort of centralized entity saying, okay, you know what, because you're a human being, we're going to give you some income, right? But when we look at sort of universal basic equity, it's actually many different parties providing value to individuals for whatever reason it is, right? It might be some sort of government entity that wants to give them, basic income. It might be different sort of projects, different sort of companies, different sort of entities that have some sort of reason and incentive to also be providing value to various individuals for something that they do, for who they are, whatever it is. And what is underpinning that is that, this needs to be a human being, not necessarily who it is, but we just need to know that it's a human being so that there's no cheating, there's no fraud, right? And then if we actually even think about in closer to the Web3 space, historically, if we think about blockchain networks, one of the key utilities for a lot of tokens is governance, right? We hear about governance tokens a lot. We hear about DAOs a lot, right? And a lot of these entities historically, it's not very democratic. Um, it seems democratic because technically anybody can participate. It doesn't really matter where you're from. You have a blockchain address. You can participate in a DAO. You can participate in governance. But the challenge to that historically also is that every single one of these, generally, it's based on sort of a proof of stake model, right? It's how many tokens you have determines how many votes you have, right? And it sort of makes sense because it can't be how many wallet addresses you have determines how many votes you have, because you can just generate unlimited number of wallet addresses, right? Um, and so it actually becomes a situation where voting and governance has historically been based on how rich you are. Okay. So the more you have, the more influence you have. And what we are able to do by creating this sort of infrastructure is actually start allowing companies and projects to be able to sort of get to a one person, one vote sort of system. It may not even, you might not want to be a direct democracy where, sort of the governance of a company or a DAO or a Web3 project be entirely one person, one vote. Might be a bicameral system. It might be a tricameral system, whatever it is, right? So that, you might even do something where it's similar to the US system, where it's representative democracy. People vote, people sort of vote for one side or the other. So, there are a lot more things that can be done when you actually know that you're dealing with a human being and not necessarily a computer program.
And you just got me present to the danger of yield farming airdrops.
I'm sorry?
And you just got me present to the danger of yield farming airdrops when you have
Yeah.
bots, owning the supply of what should be supposed to be a democracy governance structure.
I mean, you look at some of the recent airdrops, like big projects that have been airdropping hundreds of millions of dollars, some even over $1 billion, right? Worth of tokens. And every single founder comes out and says, we can't solve the civil issue because we are not able to figure out who is a person or not. Um, and that is a big issue, right? Because everybody's incentivized to just create 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, 5,000 different wallet addresses, and farm these airdrops, right? And most of these people or most of these addresses controlled by maybe one person are just dumping these tokens, and not creating long-lasting value, for the blockchains and for the projects, right? And so it's sort of essentially similar to advertising, right? Like where the airdrops is technically, call it advertising, and you look at all these industrial farming programs to be sort of click fraud, right? And we're sort of able to solve for this also.
I like it. I like what you're doing. I love it, actually.
I like it too, you know.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you very much for speaking with me today. I know it's late over there, but one last question. It's how can people find out more information about you, about Humanity Protocol? How can they start to use it? How can they create their individual graph on your protocol? How can they do that?
So we actually have not launched yet. Our test net is coming very, very soon. I'm not going to give an exact date, but the idea is that it's going to be sometime in the next couple weeks. Okay, that's all I can say. So that's number one. So do stay informed about that. And you can access our website, which is humanity.org, humanity.org. Follow us on Twitter, which is, x.com/humanityprot, because, Humanity Protocol is too long of a name, according to Twitter rules. So it's HUMANITYPROT. And you can find all sorts of information about what we're doing, and we do have a wait list on our website for joining the testnet. I think right now we're up to like 700,000-800,000 people. So there's quite a fair bit of excitement about what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks a lot, Jamil.